любимый магазин Gateway Produce. Сейчас он European Delicatessen называется.
Ты что-то перепутала. European Delicatessen в Сакраменто.
Ничего не перепутала. Это целая сеть европейских магазинов. Целых 4 магазина. Один в Сакраменто, другой в Айдахо, один в Такоме и один у нас в Ванкувере на Андрисиан-Роуд.
Ого, круто. Послушай, так это далековато от нас. Есть же магазин ближе.
Ничего страшного. Ехать на 5 минут дольше, зато гораздо дешевле. Там ты найдешь все, что я тебе написала. И всегда все свежее. Да, еще возьми салат оливье, а то я не успеваю, а гости будут уже через час.
А что там, и оливье продают?
Да там отдел кулинарии открыли. Рыбу жареную и голубцы, которые ты ел позавчера, я там купила.
Это что, все оттуда было? А я-то думаю, когда ты все успеваешь? Вот оно что. Ладно, я поехал. Если что еще надумаешь, звони.
Фатима, Фатима, всегда спешит на помощь. Фатима, 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 ответит на вопросы. Фатима, 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 ах, какое имя. Фатима, Фатима, о, Фатима.
К сожалению, автомобильные аварии, травмы на работе и другие неприятности могут настигнуть каждого. Звоните Фатиме. Хиропрактическая клиника поможет справиться с последствиями аварий, производственных травм и других несчастных случаев. Наши опытные специалисты окажут профессиональную медицинскую и юридическую помощь и помогут получить максимальную компенсацию. 503-261-71-21. 503-261-71-21.
Фатима.
Внимание!
Редакция медиахолдинга Slavic Family не несет ответственность за содержание рекламных сообщений и авторских программ.
Новости региона, выборы, кандидаты, стремления. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю в прямом эфире. Slavic Vote Live дает голос славянской общине по всему северо-западу. Мы говорим и информируем о важном в Вашингтоне, Орегоне, Калифорнии. По четвергам в 17:00. Присоединяйтесь к прямому эфиру на 10:40 АМ. Ищите Slavic Vote в соцсетях. Мы намерены продолжать продвигать свое видение и оказывать любую необходимую поддержку сообществу, чтобы изменить ситуацию к лучшему. Slavic Vote Live.
Добрый день. Спасибо, что вы подключились на передачу Slavic Vote Live. Меня зовут Дима Сащенко. С нами, как обычно, Ярослав. Нам очень приятно быть на этих волнах. И, как обычно, мы приходим, чтобы напомнить, что происходит здесь в Орегоне по поводу выборов, по поводу разных каких-то measures, какие-то биллы проходят. Я знаю, сейчас в Сенате и в Конгрессе или вот в Орегонском Капитолии проходят разные интересные разговоры по поводу разных новых законов. И мы сегодня не об этом, но мы в будущем также пригласим гостей, уже разговариваем с некоторыми сенаторами и представителями, чтобы привести их сюда, чтобы они нам немножко объяснили, какие законы сейчас проходят. И, к сожалению, как обычно, законы большинство не за наши ценности или против наших ценностей. И вот мы, как обычно, приходим на эти волны, чтобы немножко об этом поговорить, чтобы наше славянское общество знало об этом тоже, и чтобы немножко, может быть, даже приходили в Капитолию и говорили свои позиции. Я знаю, что Тимур и Андрей часто об этих тоже говорят, и нам интересно это слушать и видеть, и будем продолжать об этом говорить. Но сегодня мы немножко о другой теме, немножко мы сегодня о образовании, и что происходит в сфере образования здесь в Орегоне, и, может быть, немножко в Вашингтоне тоже. Что интересно, что сейчас многие, может, не знают, каждый год проходят выборы, и эти выборы очень важные. Ярослав, какие вот сейчас у нас выборы проходят, если ты можешь напомнить нашим славянам?
Ну, было вот это school board, о котором мы говорили, это как
школьные
да.
Позиции.
Позиции были, то я думаю, пока сейчас вот это все.
Да, это очень важно, потому что в этом году это локальные выборы больше, и эти выборы часто или локальные какие-то позиции представителей городов, но чаще всего это за школьные позиции, школьные представители. Бывает, может, даже какие-то специальные позиции в каждом месте по-разному. И бывают также позиции, как на fireboards, или такие похожие маленькие позиции, которые обычно наши люди даже не замечают, может, даже не голосуют в этих выборах, но, к сожалению, это очень важно. И нужно голосовать, и нужно участвовать. И сегодня просто, чтобы напомнить об этом. В этом году в Орегоне выборы будут в мае, если не ошибаюсь, мая 16-го. Вы положите на ваш календарь, чтобы вы не забыли, и вы должны получать, как обычно, бюллетени почти за месяц. Если вы не получили еще там книжечку, может быть, тогда вы, может быть, обратитесь, узнаете, какая у вас стация. Бывает даже у многих, если они были раньше зарегистрированы, но они не получают ничего, может, их просто сняли, потому что они не каждый год участвуют. И вот я советую всем проверить ваш статус, чтобы вы были зарегистрированы. Даже я знаю, бывают такие времена, что даже так, как говорится, randomly, так просто бац, и сняли вас с системы, и нужно просто проверить и уточнить. И опять напоминаю, 16 мая в этом году будут выборы в Орегоне, это будут локальные выборы, очень важные за школьных представителей, это, я бы сказал, самые важные позиции будут на этих, но это все там важно. И вот об этом немножко поговорим, но большинство сегодня поговорим о school choice. Я знаю, что многие наши славяне, многие забрали детей с public education и больше ищут private education или private schools или homeschool. Ярослав, ты тоже немножко поменял свою позицию, ты сейчас homeschool делаешь, правильно?
Да, сейчас, как ситуация поменялась у нас в стране, то мы решили, что уже второй год мы сейчас на дому учим детей.
Да.
И дети прошли тесты, и очень хорошо. Хорошие результаты.
Что тебе почему ты убрал детей в public education?
Там было пару ситуаций, и мы просто решили, что можно попробовать. Конечно, страшно было вначале, но мы потом решили, что это
лучше, да?
Да, лучше, и для детей это очень хорошо. Опять же, не все могут это сделать.
Да.
Даже если говорят, что все могут, то не все.
Да.
Это...
Просто качество, может, учебы в public education не то, что было раньше. Не то, что как вот мы вырастали, и тогда уже в то время были некоторые проблемы. Сейчас, конечно, все идет вниз, и больше и больше. Я знаю, что сейчас, как говорится, record number of учителей, которые уходят из учения, потому что также record numbers of детей уходят тоже.
Да.
Родители просто забирают детей со школы, потому что просто они не доверяют это как public education. И вот люди и родители ищут разные варианты. И вот сегодня один из вариантов, о котором мы поговорим, это school choice. И наш гость, она одна из главных, которая ведет тему сейчас, чтобы помочь в Орегоне продвинуть эту тему как school choice, чтобы не только вы могли выбрать другую школу, бывает это тоже тяжело, но также вы можете использовать государственные финансы, которые вы уже платите, и если вы, вот сейчас, если вы решили вашего ребенка повезти в private school, ваши деньги, которые таксы вы платите, они не идут за вашим детем. А вот это закон, который сейчас хотят сделать, и в некоторых штатах уже проходит этот закон, чтобы вы могли ваши деньги забрать с государства и поставить, не то что забрать, вы можете просто redirect или послать ваши деньги в другую школу, где вы хотите. И это очень важно, и это начнет больше, как сказать, competition со школами, чтобы школы все могли немножко участвовать и иметь немножко лучшее качество. Короче, мы об этом больше поговорим. И наш гость Дана, ее зовут Дана, она адвокат тоже, который в этом очень разбирается и уже давно этим занимается как минимум пару лет. Я знаю даже Лилия Жукова с нами, которая работает, она даже с самого начала с ней тоже работала и в каком-то сфере помогала ей тоже. И вот у них каждый год у них идет продолжение, продвигаются и постоянно что-то идет вперед, и они не останавливаются и не сдаются. Потому что это очень важно, и даже если есть разные проблемы, они все равно не сдаются. Это очень важно. И мы рады, что она сегодня с нами. Мы ее сейчас представим через пару минут. Я хотел просто напомнить, если вы с нами были пару недель уже, мы каждый раз напоминаем о новой интересной теме. Я бы сказал даже как survey, как по-русски survey сказать? Спрос, да? Опрос, да. Опрос. Если вы живете в штате Вашингтон, в городе Кларк-Каунти или городе Ванкувер, Кларк-Каунти, сейчас проходит очень интересный такой опрос наших славян или наших иммигрантов, которые недавно приехали, которые живут в Америке, уже недавно приехали, да. И спрос о том, что если вы нуждаетесь в каких-то специальных сервисах, если вы нуждаетесь в каких-то специальных программ, это сейчас они пытаются узнать, какие программы нужно сейчас преподать этим славянам или этим иммигрантам. И вот опрос проходит, чтобы это узнать. И это очень важно, потому что через пару месяцев, когда этот опрос закончится, Будут разные программы выходить, и если вы не проголосовали или не дали свой голос, сказали, может, вы не получите никакие программы. И вот очень важно, просто если вы слушаете нас, и вы слышите, и вам это интересно, и вам это очень важно, вы просто наберите нас, и мы больше объясним об этом. И опять это насчет опроса наших иммигрантов. Если вам интересен этот опрос, вы можете найти эту информацию просто позвоня нам или набрать нас в текст-месседже, или также можете нас найти на социальных сетях. Напишите нам, мы вам пришлем ссылку, чтобы вы могли ответить на этот спрос. Вы также, я знаю, что мы будем в некоторых церквях тоже это распространять, и там вы можете тоже найти, заполнить, отослать, и надеемся, что эти программы больше будут раздвигаться. И об этом мы тоже хотим, чтобы люди знали. И вот опять напоминаю, если вы хотите поучаствовать в этом спросе или опросе, напишите по телефону или позвоните, или напишите после передачи номер 971-244-2228. И еще раз 971-244-2228. Опять, если вы хотите поучаствовать в опросе по поводу сервисов новым иммигрантам, если, может, вы иммигрант или вы знаете иммигрантам, очень важно им переслать эту ссылочку или самим даже заполнить, если вы знаете, может, вы кому-то помогаете, и вы можете помочь в этом. Это, я думаю, будет лучше в общем нашем обществе здесь, в Вашингтоне, потому что это опрос в Вашингтоне. Я думаю, даже, может быть, и в Орегоне тоже какое-то похожее будет. Я знаю, что уже недавно, пару месяцев, где-то месяц назад, может, меньше, здесь в Орегоне тоже отложили некоторые суммы денег, я не помню точную сумму, или миллион, или пару миллионов, или даже биллион, чтобы была помощь иммигрантам, которые украинские иммигранты, которые приехали недавно сюда, беженцы с Украины. И вот я знаю, что будет больше и больше выходить разных финансов, чтобы помогать. И вот обращайтесь, мы будем помогать также. И в течение пару месяцев мы будем тоже объявлять разные интересные темы и разные интересные программы, которые мы будем рекламировать здесь на радио, чтобы вы могли тоже участвовать и могли, если вам нужна помощь, вы можете обращаться. Хорошо, спасибо большое. Я перехожу к нашему гостю. К сожалению, мы будем переходить на английский язык. Если вы понимаете, пожалуйста, оставайтесь. Если, может быть, нет, все равно оставайтесь. Может быть, что-нибудь научитесь. И мы будем рады вас, если вы останетесь. Спасибо большое. Спасибо. Donna, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I think we've been trying to have you come on the radio for a little while now, and it's been tough with a few different reasons, but we finally got you on, and I'm excited to speak a little bit about some of the things that you're doing in the community and some of the things that you're working on. So, but before we start, just for the folks who might be tuning in for the first time, and they don't know who is Slavic Vote, I usually have Yaroslav do a quick introduction, who we are and what we do, and just to give a general idea of who is Slavic Vote.
Yeah, so I'll do this in English.
Yeah, please.
So Slavic Vote, we're about 4 years old, a nonprofit organization. Kind of started because of what's going on in the schools. Because there was a Russian community that's been living in this area specifically of Oregon, Vancouver, Portland. We've been over here probably for about 30 years or something.
Yeah.
It's been a while. And just within the last probably 4 years is when the Slavic community kind of woke up, and we realized that a lot of people were not registered to vote to begin with. So they were not involved in the communities whatsoever. We kind of took the approach that, we're good at business, we'll just dive into there. But we realized that, without actually participating, doing the voting, things were starting to change pretty quickly, especially within the last 5 years. We've seen a lot of changes that were not happening the past 25 years that we were here.
Well, April 1st, this kind of marks a kind of an anniversary in many ways, because April 1st, 4 years ago, was when there was a huge rally. Probably it was one of the biggest rallies where the Slavic community came out. I don't know, it was like 4,000 or 5,000 maybe in Olympia. And I remember it was on April 1st, and that's when we actually came out and started like recruiting people for this organization and talking to people about registering to vote, because a lot of people they want to do something. They don't like the laws that are being passed, but they don't understand that you can prevent this by voting for the right candidates, or the candidates that stand for the community. So the April 1st, which is in a couple of days here, will be kind of memorable.
Anniversary.
Yeah, anniversary in many ways.
So after registrations, which we did pretty much for about the first year and a half, 2 years, that's all we did. It was just travel around. We ended up realizing that people need education too, besides being registered, because trying to read those ballots, they are written by lawyers. It's super hard to understand what's written on there, so we kind of had to work through that. And then the last part, which we've been kind of working on for the past year or so, is the activation part. We're trying to get people to actually go on a school board or try to run for a school board, just small positions, nothing major, just to kind of get the process. We're not going for the win per se, but we just want to see, what the process is like and how it works. And I think we had a couple people on the board that ran for
School board, for city
councils, and we kind of are getting familiar with the process. So in getting the community active. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Good.
So trying to educate, trying to just activate the community so we're better represented in many ways. So
What's the size of the Slavic community?
So the Slavic community in the metro area, and I don't know, this is kind of an outdated number, but for a long time it's always been known it's about 150,000 Slavic people in the metro area, Portland metro. So, in the Clark County alone, which is probably the majority of them are, there's about 60,000, but this is pre-Ukraine war numbers, pre-Ukraine, pre-mass exodus of the Slavic community from Northwest because of everything with the 2020 elections and not elections but just everything that was happening in the last couple of years. A lot of them left the Pacific Northwest to South Carolina and so on, but we also saw a lot of people coming here from California and Ukraine. So I would say maybe it's about the same still because of just people shuffling around. But big community, and I would say total. When we kind of estimate it's probably about 1 million people on the West Coast, about 500,000 California, maybe less now, and then the other half here in the Pacific Northwest. But it's a big number, and we don't know for sure. And that's why the census in 2020 was interesting. I was particularly interested in it because I wanted to help get a better number, so we can use that in our advantage in many ways. Because I think sometimes if we don't participate, we can't. It's a leverage. We can use that as leverage in many ways. So, it's a big community, and that includes not just Russian speaking. That includes Ukrainians, folks from Moldova in many ways, and just the surrounding countries around Russia because they were all part of the Soviet Union, and they all spoke Russian, or at least forced to speak Russian. But it's a big community. So. But thank you for joining us. We're, like I said, excited. Before we jump in and talk about what you're working on, we always like to know kind of the story behind the person, what drove that person, what drove you to do this, and take as much time as you need to just we would love to know where you're from originally and just your story. What motivates you to do what you do?
Okay, well, I'm originally from I consider it Montana. But we came out here because of my parents, and my father had a business with his two brothers. So we've been in this area for quite a while. And now I'm retired as an attorney and a CPA and a small business owner and real estate broker. And I have a master's in finance. So I have a good skill set, things to do with numbers. But I ran for the school board in Tiger Tualatin in the last session, the 21 election, which was my first foray into anything political. And it's supposed to be a nonpartisan thing, but it didn't feel like that.
Right.
But I was just basically my candidacy was just to say, let's make our schools back to reading, writing, arithmetic. Let's get rid of activism. Let's get rid of politics. Let's get rid of all that. Let's just focus on giving these kids the best education possible. And so my kids and I and volunteers, we knocked on about 7,000 doors, spoke to a lot of people, had a wonderful time. I wasn't successful. I didn't end up winning, but it was a fun experience. And so after that, I thought, okay, what do I want to do now that I'm retired and I have some time? And so basically decided that I wanted to do school choice because I think there's a need in Oregon to improve our schools. And I think that we as parents owe it to our children to do everything we possibly can to make sure that they get the best education that they can and that they don't really have the time to waste, the time to do it over. They need it now. So in our family, we would sit around the table and just sort of talk about school choice. And I would always think, well, if we just said each child was, let's say, worth $10,000, and wherever that child went, that's where that money should go. So if they chose school A, then the school would get the money. If they chose school B, that school would get it. It just was sort of logical and common sense. And so I thought, well, how hard can it be to figure out what school choice is? So I spent considerable time talking to policy people across the country in about 20 different states. I read existing legislation that's all across the country. I read legislation that was proposed here in Oregon, but none has passed here because our legislature seems to be anti-school choice. So in doing that and working with constitutional attorneys, and basically this group of folks that we had, we decided that we were going to bring a citizen initiative. We didn't want to do it through the legislature because we didn't want it to be a top-down situation. We wanted it to be written by us, for us, sort of the of the people, by the people, for the people. So we wrote a measure in 2021 to go to the Oregon Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, so the Oregon Constitution is the source and the trumping of all laws here. We brought it in 2021. It was thrown out by the Secretary of State for sort of a bogus reason, but okay, whatever. Then we decided that we would take that combined measure and we pulled it apart, and now we have a standalone open enrollment school choice measure, and then we have a private school choice measure. And so when we take those two measures together and when they pass in November of 24, what they will do is they will empower parents to decide which learning environment is the best for their child. So if a parent decides that a public school is the best environment, the parent can have the child go there. But for some parents, they think that private school is a better option. So what these two measures do is they let the parents know and decide, because parents know their children much better than some bureaucrat. And basically we have a situation where, for the most part, parents and children are assigned to a school based on where they live. But that's quite arbitrary because some parents are able to afford a house in a very schwanky district where other parents are not able to do that. And so we have what's called zip code discrimination, which means that certain parents, the children in certain areas might be getting a better education through no fault of the parents. It's just based on their income situation. And we have other situations where it just felt like there were arbitrary barriers to our children getting a good education. And we thought, well, that doesn't make sense. Let's make it wide open. Let's let the parents decide where the child is best served. Public school, charter school, private school, homeschool. Parents know better than some bureaucrats, so let's make it so that the parent gets to decide. Let's remove all those barriers. Let's make it actually the land of educational opportunity in Oregon, because we owe it to our children to make sure they get a good education. And we don't want to put everybody in a box and say, everybody's going to be in a box, everybody's going to learn the same way, and then just ignore the fact that there's some children in there that's great. They'll thrive and they'll reach their potential. But there are other kids that, for whatever reason, that's not a good environment. Maybe they can't take that much stimulation. Maybe they don't like to be in an environment where they can't touch the things that they're working with. So all kids learn different ways. So we needed to make it a system that they can go to the environment that works for them. So we have the two measures. The one measure is open enrollment, and Oregon had open enrollment from 2012 to 2019, but unfortunately the legislature let it lapse. So the open enrollment that we have now, you have to get permission from the district that you're assigned to and also permission from where you want to go. Well, that's not going to happen. They're not going to want to give you the permission to leave, and the people the district where you want to go, they might not want to have your child come. So we designed it to be all year round. The parent can choose any public school, any charter school, and if that school has room, if it has, a space in the 7th grade, the parent can select that school, and then the school will have to take the child. Because again, wherever the child will learn the best, that's where the child should go. So there's also artificial caps on virtual charter schools that were put in for a silly reason that blocks some kids from being able to go to a virtual school. Well, if there needs to be 10% of the student body going to a virtual school, then darn it, 10% should be able to go there. And so our amendment just blows away that whole cap and makes any child able to go to that virtual school. So if they want to stay in the public school, they can go anywhere, and it's open to all kids, universal, around the year, so it doesn't have to be on the 3rd Wednesday of the 2nd month from 1 to 2 in the afternoon. It's all year round.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. My question was, Before we kind of, tie into just Oregon specific, is there any other states that are doing this already, that already have this legalized or have this already on their ballot? What other states are doing this as well?
We do. Basically, 2021 was considered the year of school choice. There were states across the country. It was almost like a tsunami washing across the country, where states were doing it through their legislature. They were enacting either open enrollment policies or what we call the private school choice policies. So there are at least 65 programs across the country that have private school choice. There are innumerable states that are proposing it, have proposed it. But again, all those states, and it's wonderful if you can get it, those are all states that are doing it through their legislature.
Right.
And so the legislature that was in force right now, they could propose a law and have it passed. But the problem could be that the next legislative session that comes in with new people, they could then say, well, we're going to remove the protections. We're going to gut the program. We're going to add things that are bad for parents. And so there isn't that sense of permanency. There isn't that sense of protection if you're doing it statutorily. So across the country, there have been programs, and it's wonderful. And if they're successful, that's going to be great. We just knew that for Oregon, given the climate here, we couldn't wait for our legislature. So we're doing 2 amendments to the Constitution, because that way we're bypassing the legislature, we're bypassing the governor. We're saying we citizens are bringing this to other citizens to have the right to vote on it, because we designed it for the citizens. We designed it basically as a mom. I'm writing it from the perspective of a mom, trying to make it as user-friendly as possible, to make it as simple as possible to achieve the goal of letting our kids go to the environment that works for them.
So basically, my understanding is instead of trying to go through the legislature, like you said, where nobody's gonna probably want to do that because it's just not the right time. So you're essentially going around the legislature, around the Capitol, or around the senators and representatives, the lawmakers, and you're trying to do a ballot measure. So the voters will vote on it.
Correct.
And then if it passes, and I know in some states, is it an advisory kind of a amendment? Is this something that they can just look at and consider it and maybe throw it away, or it has to be?
It's in there. So the 2 measures, when they pass, they will be cemented into the Constitution.
Okay.
And so the protections will be there then for the parents, for the students, and for the teachers.
So
they're going to be there for the duration.
And the governor cannot veto it or anything like that. Well, that's good.
No.
So that's a lot better than I think a lot of people are understanding it, because I think my initial understanding was that maybe this is something that the governor can stop, which we would know that she probably would. But this definitely gives a lot of hope, because if enough people come out and vote, which we need them to vote,
right,
this has a very good potential. And the reason I was asking other states is just to show that this is not just a one situation, one example. There's other states that are doing this, and they're having a good success with it. And we're just one of those states that are hoping to also bring school choice, which is, it makes sense.
It's education opportunities.
Yeah.
We're making sure that the parents can choose the environment that helps the child. There have been many states across the country that have brought it statutorily. We're doing it constitutionally because we don't want to wait. We can't wait on our children. They need the education opportunity now.
Right.
So we're bringing it as a citizen initiative that will be on the November of 2024 ballot, and we need 50% plus 1 to vote in favor of it, because then it'll be enacted, it'll be in the Constitution. And what's wonderful then is the way that we drafted them, we put in the words that are necessary. So when I was looking at legislation across the country that had 10 or 12 pages of blah, 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 I would just narrow down to the things that are absolutely important for helping our children and just discard the rest. Because what we want these 2 amendments to do is be put into the Constitution in their simplest form, so everybody knows what they are. They're empowering parents. And then when the legislature does its implementing legislation around it, after measures pass, the legislature will do implementing. And they can decide at that point that they're only going to mail the check on a Thursday, and they're going to use a number 2 pencil, or they're going to use a flag stamp, or whatever they want to do. But what they cannot do in that implementing legislation is they can't change the words in the constitutional amendment, and they can't change the impact of this. So once they do their implementing, just to basically get the process started, it can't change the protections that we're putting in here. And in addition, once these measures pass and they go into the Constitution, they will nullify any existing laws that conflict with these measures, and they will stop any future conflicting laws. So these are the holy grail of putting this into the Constitution to help parents, help students, help teachers. And not be subject to the whims of a legislature that's hostile to school choice or hostile to religious freedom or hostile to letting parents be the driving force here. Because what we're also doing, there was a case from 1925 that came out of Oregon, Pierce versus Society of Sisters. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was a unanimous decision, 9-0, coming back down to Oregon, smacking the governor in the head and say, you may not force all of our children into a public school, that the parents have the right and the duty to educate their children, that the children are not the mere creature of the state. So what the state did is it said, okay, fine. So they said, well, everybody has to go to public school except for some statutory exceptions, one of which is homeschool, one of which is private school. But again, that's statutorily based, which they could tweak, they could change, they could make more horrible. So what we're doing with this amendment is we're codifying that United States Supreme Court decision into the Oregon Constitution to forever remind our legislature and our governor that it's the parents who have the right to educate their children. It's the parents that are the driving force here. Their voice is what counts, and that the legislature can't muck with it and try to strip the parents of their rights anymore. So that's the crucial point of putting it in the Constitution to make sure that the legislature doesn't try to, enact something because they don't seem to understand that it's the parent who owns the child, that has the child. It's the right of the parent to make sure that child learns and learns the right things.
Well, I think we're hearing a lot of rhetoric around nowadays that it's there's more and more people coming out and saying that it's not parents' choice, it's educator's choice or the union's choice or whatever. But before, I know I have a question, and I know Yaroslav has questions, but my question is, so was there a strategic plan to have this on the 2024 presidential election?
No, it's
Did it
just
happen to be-
timing-wise. It's a long process to go through a citizen initiative. It takes time to first draft it. We spent a lot of time making sure we had it right, talking to other policy people and constitutional attorneys. Then you start the process where you have to go out and get sponsorship signatures, and then those are verified by the Secretary of State. And then we got certified or ballot titles from the Attorney General, and then the government union sued the Attorney General and held it up in the Supreme Court for several months.
Is it the OEA?
Yeah. And then we finally bounced out of the Supreme Court with positive news. We're all clear. Everything's a go.
Nice.
And that was about February 15. So it just takes a long process to get to that point. And then now we are collecting our petition signatures. We need to get about 250,000 signatures for each measure to get them both on the November of 24 ballot. And we have until July 5 of 2024 to do that. And then they spend about a month looking at those, and then it will be on the ballot July 5 of 2024.
Okay, so
we're out there right now all across the state collecting signatures. So we would love help from all of your community to help with that.
We'll get to that for sure. Absolutely. I know Yarek has a question. My last question was, because I like the idea of doing it for the 2024 election because the turnout is always the best. So,
Yes.
and I think
That's just coincidentally. It was just
yeah.
that the timing takes us that
right.
long.
But I think that's probably going to be in a good thing. It's going to help, I think. Yaroslav, I know you have writing a lot of questions down.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that I think most people that living in Oregon, I know this is for Oregon, not Washington, but we hope that if something happens in Oregon, it'll eventually happen in Washington.
Right.
So you're setting a precedent. My question is we know the environment in Oregon, but have other states went this route before and it worked, or are we like the pioneers?
No, we're the pioneers. We were the
perfect state for this.
We're Oregon. We're hard-working folks, but again, all the other states are doing statutory through their legislature.
It's because they probably had an environment that would allow for that.
Where they had enough votes
Like,
to get something passed.
Well, not South Carolina, for example.
No, and Arizona and some other states that have had a mix of, and this is supported by Republicans, Democrats, Independents. It's not a partisan issue. This is, do you love your children? Do you love your grandchildren? Do you want them to get the best education? So it polls well with everybody. It just happens that our legislature is fundamentally anti-school choice. So it's just never going to come out of our legislature. And our kids are too important to let it languish and wait any longer. So looking at the climate here and looking at legislation, we took legislation and model acts and we just turned them into a citizen constitutional amendment, making it brief, making it concise, making it have the words and the concepts that we need instead of having, legislation that's 12 pages long full of horrible stuff. But the one thing I didn't get back to is we have the two measures. One is the open enrollment, which people are familiar with because we've had it here before. But we also have what's equally as important, which is the school choice, the private school choice. Because again, there could be a family that says, the public school is just not the right place for my child. My child's being bullied, or they have a learning disability they need to have in a different environment, or many various reasons. So we have this other measure that says you can opt out of the public system. You can take some of the tax money that you've paid back with you, and you can use that money then to customize the education for your child in the private sector. So you can have your child go to a private school. You can also use the money to pay for tutors or education therapy or transportation, or if you choose to homeschool your child, you can use it for curriculum. You can use it for the transportation. You can do you can spend it on all the kind of things that you as a parent know your child needs, because you know your child. And even within a family, if you have 4 children, they all learn differently. And so it might be, and some families have it where one child's in a private school, one child's in a charter school, one child is homeschooled, because each child learns differently. And so the goal of both of these measures is always keep it on the kids, focus on the child. Where does the child get the best opportunity to learn and reach their full potential? Because the most horrible thing would be to have 10 years go by and some child come up to us and say, under your watch, I didn't reach my full potential. I wasn't able to learn. I didn't become the next Elon Musk or the next Steve Jobs or something, because I wasn't in an environment where I could learn correctly. So with these two measures, we're saying, hey, parents, you figure out what your child needs. You choose all these environments. And on the private school choice measure, it's very important that people understand that when the money goes from the state to the account for the parent, one, the parent never touches the money, so we don't have to worry about the parent, sneaking off to the Caribbean or something. And in addition, we specifically write that the money, when it goes from the state to the account, it stops being government money. That severs the legal tie between the government and the money, because some people are concerned, I don't want to take government money. I don't want them to regulate and come into my house. That won't happen here. We specifically write into the constitutional amendment, the money stops being government money. And there's examples. It's very important. There's examples of that where it's already happening. If in the education world, if you look at money that comes from the federal government to pre-K, the money goes right to a parent, and the parent can choose a religious pre-K or a non-religious or wherever, and there aren't strings. And then similarly, when you look at post-high school, there are Pell Grants, and that money comes from the government, goes right to the student. The student can choose any university at that point. So we have freedom. We have money available that doesn't come with strings. What we don't have it in is the K through 12, and there's a reason for that.
It's the biggest group too, probably.
And we're bringing that reality here, that opportunity for parents. So we specifically say the money stops being government. We don't let the parent touch it. We also chose to have the administrator of the account not be the government. So instead, we're allowing a parent to choose a nonprofit organization. So the money would go from the state to the nonprofit. And then the parent would just tell the nonprofit, hey, I want little Johnny to go to this private school, or I want this curriculum for little Sally, or whatever, and I need a tutor for my child, or I need an educational therapist. I'm hearing a lot of parents tell me that because of masking, a lot of children have now developed a slight disability, and they need some help because they weren't able to read people's mouths, or they weren't able to formulate the words. So here's a perfect opportunity. The parent can use this money and have that therapy given to their child. And the parent gets $7,600 per child per year. And if they don't spend it all in a year, if they're frugal, then whatever they don't spend rolls over to the next year, and then the next year and the next year, and they get a new allotment. And then when the child completes high school, it's not like the money just disappears or goes back to the state. Instead, we specifically write that whatever's left in the account for the child can be used in Oregon for the child's college or university or trade school or vocational school. So we're empowering these children to get the best possible opportunity to learn the most. Not all kids go to college. Not all kids go to a trade school. Some just go out and start a business. But we're giving these kids the opportunity to get the best education. So when they do complete high school, they can either go start a job, they can go to college, they can go to a trade school. They have a skill set then. And then they would go out into the world fully equipped to do wonderful things, to reach their potential. And so even parents right now, even in your community, They might not all have kids in school, but they have grandkids, or they're going to need a doctor, they're going to need a truck driver, they're going to need a pilot. So the better able we are to educate our children and give them a skill set, that will help Oregon, because those will be our future leaders.
So go ahead.
Oh, and then parents maybe who have left Oregon because they were depressed, they could come back now. When Oregon becomes this premier education center, parents will come running back to Oregon because they'll say, I want to participate in giving my children the best opportunity. And when there's all these parents here, the businesses that fled, they will come back and say, hey, now there's all these business, or all these people, they need more business. So it's going to be this huge entrepreneurial free enterprise boom for Oregon.
Yeah.
It'll help the education, it'll help jobs, it'll help our students. And it's a wonderful
Great
thing for students
competition.
and
I was going to
parents.
say, I'm going to probably have to move from Vancouver back.
It's going to create a lot of competition, which is going to be
For Washington,
huge.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
gonna
Well,
be...
so here's a question for individuals who don't have any kids yet in their school system, in the school, and they're paying. My understanding, everybody who pays taxes, they're contributing to education,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that money that is contributing, is that at all is that at all saved during this time and then can be used in the future? How does that work?
Well, if let's say you don't have any children,
Right.
you've been paying taxes in, you won't be able to use this yet because it's not something that goes
Is
into
it
an
collecting
account.
at all, or
It's spent. It
goes
comes
to
to the government
everybody, yeah.
because remember,
Okay.
the government doesn't have any money. It just
Right.
extracts money from the taxpayers. So we decided, maybe 100 years ago, that it was in the best interest of all of our students that we would all put money into a hat and have that money then spent by the government to give public education, not public school, but public education. So all of our children would get a good education. So we as taxpayers give the money to the government effectively in trust, hoping that they'll use it correctly for all children. And if you look at the Oregon Constitution, it doesn't ever say public schools. So the money is not only to be spent in public schools, but unfortunately, that's sort of where it's ended up. But this money is supposed to be spent on all Oregon children, whether they're in a public school classroom, a private school classroom, or a homeschool living room. They're all children of Oregon. They all deserve this money, and the money is supposed to be spent on
Right.
them. So basically, if you're a parent, when this passes, if you're a parent, you can raise your hand and say, hey, I want to use this either to go to any public school or to say, I'm opting my child out. I want some of my tax money back. If you don't have a child at that point, it's not like, at least in this version, maybe the next version, it's not like it's put off in reserve for you later.
that'd be
But-
nice, but it's
maybe version 2 we can do that. But right
For
now
sure.
it's for the parents who have the children there. They can opt out. All they have to do is basically tell the government, I'm out of the public school. This is my nonprofit. Send the money over there.
That's when it
the money
starts
gets there.
calculating.
Yeah. And then the
Nice.
money becomes the parent's money, not the government's. And we also wrote it's not taxable income to the parent.
Right.
Because we don't want to set a double whammy there.
Before we continue, do you mind if I take a quick break?
Sure.
We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to just say a few things, and then I know Yaroslav has a lot of questions. I know I have a lot of questions. This is a very exciting topic, and we might have to bring you back because the time is flying, and I don't think we'll get to any of our half of our questions.
Okay.
I just want to take a quick moment to thank some of our sponsors that are allowing us to be here on this program. Some of the sponsors are our Solutions 80/20. We got Start Here, Gold Cup Coffee, which is another great place where you can go get some coffee in Vancouver. Exceptional Homes, Best Realty, American Realty. Then we also have Dreamhouse Construction and Red Hills Construction and Pelmeni. Those are some of the few of our sponsors that allow us to be here, that are sponsoring, supporting our mission. And I just want to remind folks, if you have a business, if you support our mission, if you want to support, you can always reach out to us on social media or by emailing us at info@slavicvote.org, and we can set up a sponsor program. You can also donate on our website and continue promoting this organization, continue supporting, so we can continue moving forward with the mission to continue bringing guests like Donna and others, and hopefully eventually we'll be able to have a much more representation in the government of our community and just continue bring our community forward. So again, thank you for all of our sponsors. And if you are interested to support us, you can always find that information on our website. Just visit slavicvote.org and you can find additional information there for some of our previous programs. Obviously, you can always find our previous programs on YouTube. Don't forget that. And our social media, like always, a lot of good content there as well. So again, thank you for tuning in. If this is the first time you're tuning in and you missed our introduction, we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Donna, and she's sharing about a very exciting kind of a development in Oregon if that's the word that I can use. And she already shared a lot of great things, and I feel like we're running out of time with the questions that we have, because I think there's a lot of it's such a big thing, and there's a lot of questions and not enough time to answer it all. So we'll have to continue this. But basically, she is working to promote, or she's working on a initiative or a bill measure that's going to be on election 2024 next year. That we're all going to vote for, to bring school choice to Oregon. And my understanding of this was that this could be vetoed by the governor or anybody else who's anti school choice, but this is a lot better than that. So if you missed half this program, you can always rewind back and hear that. But the question that I know I have, but I know Yaroslav has a question as well, so I'm going to go ahead and have him.
So you mentioned earlier that when you did the research, looking at other states and how they went about, even though they're not going the constitutional route, they're doing going through the legislature. How has it worked out for those other states? Because I mean, if I'm an Oregonian, I'm just going to imagine, and I would, let's say, work for a public school, this would scare the bejeebies out of me, if you want to put it that way. Because right now there's such a huge drain from public schools just with the current situation. I think I was even reading an article because I live in Clark County. So many parents pulled kids out of school that they're even having trouble funding. So they're cutting programs, they're cutting all this other stuff, and they're asking the government for more money, and it's not solving the issue. How have you seen this being implemented in other states? So they've been doing this for a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. How's that worked out? Has it created more private schools? Has it created more schools opening, better competition? What's the atmosphere like? Because a lot of parents, I don't think they've heard about this, but they haven't really looked into it yet.
Sure. So school choice has been around for quite a while. At least the last 30 years, the school choice that we're familiar with has been around. But there have actually been schools from, I don't want to say a date because I'll get it wrong, but from a long time ago where a district or a state had some. But when you look at the states that have enacted it in the last 30 years, the results have been wonderful for students. And again, that's the focus here. The student is getting a better education, and a good example is Florida. They started, I think when Jeb Bush was governor, and I'm going to get probably they were in the low performance and maybe in the bottom third of the states in the country. Now, after having a robust school choice program, they are in like slot 3. So they have moved tremendously from being toward the bottom up to the top. And they are sort of the pioneer, the leader in school choice. And they've had a variety of different programs. And one thing to keep in mind, too, is a lot of the most recent school choice came about because parents with disabled children were very frustrated that their children weren't getting the services that they needed in the public school. And so a lot of parents banded together and said, we need to have a system where our child can be educated somewhere else and actually get the services and the money that needs to be spent. And so a lot of this came up from special needs. And then, some of the states started with that program, and then they expanded it when they saw how successful it was. And they went to maybe all students or almost all students, and then they had different caveats about maybe a low-income student based on a threshold of parent income. Sometimes they would say that the child had to be in public school first for a certain number of days. So there have been other programs. Arizona just recently passed, again statutorily, but a universal kind of Molly bar the door. It's open, everybody's leaving, and it's wonderful. Everybody can leave to whichever environment they want. And that passed, I believe it was last summer. So the success story is there, and there are at least 30 years of studies that show that school choice, when you have school choice around a public school system, it actually helps both the students who remain in the public schools and the students who leave. That both groups of students perform better on their tests, they have better academic retention, and in fact, even the public school teachers get better wages, because for the first time, with school choice and opportunities around a public school, now these public school teachers have opportunities themselves. They could take their credentialed and their experience and they could go somewhere else. And so there's an opportunity where an administrator would say, hey, we want Mr. Johnson who teaches ninth grade geometry. We want him to stay. We value him. So they have to actually treat him better and give him a better salary. And in addition, with the opportunities of private schools and everything around a public school, now the public schools are forced to actually listen to the complaints and the concerns of parents. So in Oregon, we have very contentious school board meetings because school boards don't seem to be listening to the concerns of parents. They don't seem to care. So with school choice and the opportunity for the parents who are not happy in the public school to leave and take their child elsewhere to an environment that aligns with their values or meets the needs of their children, the temperature in those school board meetings will go down because now the parents who agree with the curriculum, they agree with what's being taught, will be able to stay there. The other parents will have an avenue to leave and take their child to a different environment. So it helps that, it helps the school performance, it helps the teachers. And fundamentally, the other question that you were broaching was, well, wow, if we have school choice, it's going to give you the heebie-jeebies for public school. But actually, the way that we designed this, it will allow more money into public schools than is in there now. I know that seems counterintuitive, but if you think about what we're doing here, is we're saying that we're only taking a portion of what's attributable to a child in a public school. So if little Johnny walks out of the public school, he only takes a portion of the taxes that would be spent in the public school. The remaining money stays in the public school. So now we have a situation where we have fewer students in the public school, but more money. So there's more money available to spend on the public school students who stay there. And for the first time, based on the way we designed this, the public schools will actually get a percentage of money for children that were not in the count right now. The kids that are out in the private sector and the homeschools who are not attributed any money, they would actually be part of the pot, and the schools would be able to save 20% for a student that's now not even in the count. So it's actually a boon to public schools. There will be more money in public schools than there is right now. And the main focus here is allowing the student to find whichever environment, and they can flow freely. It's not you just choose once and you're stuck. You could be in a public school now and choose to go to a charter school, and maybe that works for a while, and then maybe you wanted to choose to go to a private, or maybe you wanted to go back to a public or whatever. So it's a very fluid because children change, they learn differently, and maybe they're in an environment right now that isn't working, but maybe if they went for a while to a private school and had some tutoring, had some therapy, and then maybe they decided for whatever reason they want to go back to a public school. So it allows the students to flow freely and the money to flow freely too, because remember, all this tax money that we put in the hat that we give in trust to the government is supposed to be spent on these children. They're all Oregon's kids. They all deserve this money.
That's great. So I know we heard a lot of great things. I want to hear what are some criticisms of this as well? Has there been any criticism? I know.
No, everybody loves this.
I know. I'm sure. Like you said, OEA, the teachers union, the biggest Oregon teachers union, went after you because they're gonna be hurt. Probably one of the most. So I just want to hear maybe what is some criticism out there about this?
Well,
And
the one issue that you mentioned is this fear that in our case is unfounded, which is, oh my gosh, it's going to defund a public school. But that's not the case here. We've actually designed it so that it helps a public school, gives them more money than they had otherwise. And when you think about it, the money is not supposed to be spent in a school building. It's not supposed to be spent on a teacher or an adult. It's always supposed to be spent on the child, at the child level, giving the child the education. So we want to always keep the focus on making sure the child gets the good education. If a public school is doing a bang-up job and everything's wonderful, the teachers are happy, the parents are happy, the kids are learning well no kids will leave there. So there won't be any shuffling of money from that situation. But if we have a situation where there is a school that they aren't listening to the needs of the parents, they aren't delivering a product that helps the child, if the child is not being able to graduate and know how to read or make change or go off and have a fruitful life, then I think there are going to be situations where students will leave that environment. And that's a good thing because that makes sure that the child then can find the environment to learn in. And we don't want to trap them in an environment just because the money is used to going to that particular building. If that building is not serving the child, let the money out. Let's just break it open like a piñata. Let that money flow to where the child can get the education.
well, it's going to be a basic competitive environment, which is always going to be best for the student. The best quality education is always going to be when there's more competition with schools.
Right.
So I totally support that.
So just the fluidity of having, because I remember when we were leaving the public school, it felt like almost like a funeral, not a funeral. It felt like we were getting disowned or something because they kept asking us, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? Like there was no way back. And you mentioned that with the open enrollment, the way that you're setting it up is you can do it throughout the year. You don't have to wait till the end of the year for your kid to be in the wrong place for a whole entire year. So my other question is since there's two different sounds like there's two different things people are going to be
What-
petitioning or
what-
voting on. So open enrollment and then school choice. For this to actually work, do we need to make sure that both of this goes through?
Yes,
good
because
question.
together it gives the parent the full smorgasbord of choices.
Okay.
Because if it's only one that passes and the other one doesn't, then the parent is only getting half of the opportunity and the child is only getting half of the chance of getting a good education.
What happens
So-
if one of them only passes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like,
Well, we're banking on them both passing because
Okay.
again, the focus here is on letting the parent decide where the child can get the best environment, whether it's public school, charter school, which is also public, private school or homeschool, wherever that is. And we had to break them into two because of the Secretary of State throwing us out when we did them together. So we're bringing them as two, and we want them to be brought together and passed together because, again, the goal here is I don't know what your children need, I don't know what your children need, but the parent does, and we want them to have the full choices because right now maybe they enroll in a public school and it's great for a few months and then something happens. Maybe they the child starts to be bullied or falls behind or something, and so the open enrollment measure allows the parent to change any time of the year. And maybe sometimes they want to go to a private school for K through 8, and that works, and then they want to come back to a public school so they can be on a sports team maybe or graduate with their friends or whatever. So the parent can move the child in and out and all around, again, focusing on making sure that the child is in an environment that works best for the child.
Let's say if only one passes, does this whole thing fall apart, or is it still is this
better,
eligible?
I think.
Well, yeah, either of them will be better than what we have
Yeah.
right now, but the goal is to have them both pass because they both are doing the hard work here of making sure that Oregon has the best education system that empowers the parents, that lets the children learn. And they really shouldn't fall separately because they're both doing the same thing. They're just empowering different environments.
Right.
So
I can see this being on the ballot, which is great. So I think one of the important things is the language that's going to be on the ballot, because there's going to be probably for and anti.
oh yes.
So that's who's going to be writing that? Because like I said, there's going to be probably both sides, right? And
Oh,
there's
yes.
going to be
Oh, yes.
a lot of money put into anti marketing on this. And are you guys going to be? Do you have enough money to do marketing on this as well?
Well, we would love help. We need
Yes.
money. This is going to take a huge amount of money because we are up against opponents that have
Yeah.
more money than God. So, and they can get money nationally. So they have unlimited millions and millions of dollars, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep the system that they have, which is not good for our students.
Yeah.
Our students should be able to move freely to the environment that works for them. They shouldn't be locked in a box just because some grown-ups think that's a good box. Those grown-ups aren't the parents. The parents need to be making this decision. So I would love millions of dollars from your community and everybody else across, Oregon and across the country, because this is going to take a tremendous amount to basically promote it right now, just to get people to understand that we're out there, that we're bringing these measures. Then the advertising, and you can spend, huge amount on advertising, but we need to be able to get the message out that this helps students, it helps parents, it helps public schools, it helps public school teachers. So when people actually learn all the facts about what these two measures can do, there really shouldn't be any pushback. There really shouldn't be any criticism of it, because the focus here is on helping the kids get the education. Do you love your kids? Do you want them to get a good education? These two measures will deliver that. It's not about the adults in the room, making, egos or having, the money flowing to where they think it should be. It's making sure the kids get a good education.
Where do you guys getting the funding to run this campaign?
I'm writing letters to everybody and just asking for help for donations. We're getting lots of donations in, but we need somewhere in the $15 to $20 million range to have, because advertising is so expensive. And we know that pretty soon the opponent will wake up and attack us again. And unfortunately, they'll spread a message that isn't truthful. It isn't telling what these measures can actually do. They will base it on fear. But again, if we can get our message out there to let people know, look, these are what these measures do. They help parents, they help students, they help schools. They are not trying to attack anybody. They're not trying to change any school system. They are putting in place a way for parents to find the environment for the child. And it's all about giving the child the best education. And that should be the end of the discussion. Does a child get help by this? Yes, boom, done.
Have you guys done any polling on in Oregon? What's kind of the feel in Oregon?
Yeah, the polling has always been very good. It's usually, and again, it's all across the board. It's Republican, Democrat, Independent. It's always in the high 60s, low 70s. It's pretty constant whether they're school parents or general public. And that's because I think everybody does, when they step back and get away from their own jobs and they say, what's the role of a parent? The role of a parent is to make sure their child gets everything they need, and one of the fundamental stepping stones to a good future is a good education. Yeah. So we need to really focus on, as parents, making sure our kids get a good education. So that's why I think it polls well.
Yes, we have a couple minutes left. I know Yaroslav still has some questions. Go ahead.
I'm gonna forfeit mine.
Well, we have one more minute, a couple minutes for one more question. So go ahead.
If you have one, you go ahead and shoot for it.
Well, I know you always have the best question, so I'll let you finish it off.
I think you pretty much answered everything that I had on here. The main concern I had was that, if one gets passed and the other one doesn't. Thank you for clearing up the open enrollment part, because you said that the state already had something set up, but it was a yearly, so it wouldn't allow people to be more fluid. And then the school choice, I think that was explained really well. I don't really have any more questions.
Yeah, I think we'll have to schedule another time. Sometimes maybe
to get an update for sure.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of small little details that I think a lot of people like. I know one question that I had before this program from someone I was talking to about the government involvement. If this is gonna at all allow the government to dictate where this, the curriculum and everything else. Nope. So we'll talk.
There is one thing we also wrote into the measure. Again, it's like we build a wall like this microphone, and over here the government can regulate public schools like it always has, but over here in the private world, the government can't climb over the wall and regulate. So in addition to saying that it's in the Constitution to tell the government that we're enacting and codifying that Supreme Court decision, and we're also saying that the money stops being government money, we also say that the government cannot climb across the wall and tell a parent or a private school to change their curriculum, their teaching practice, their teacher qualifications, their creed, or their admission policy. Right now, Oregon doesn't have a statutory mechanism to basically regulate private schools except for safety measures, sprinklers and things. And we're freezing that in place to say we want to have this measure, and this measure will protect the identity and focus of private schools and homeschoolers, to allow them to continue to teach in the manner that they think is best for their students. So we put this big brick wall in. It says the government can't come over, because the last thing we want to do is turn a private school or a homeschool into a public school, because that would remove the ability of a parent to have that full choice. So we say there's public schools, and that can be regulated, and there's private schools and homeschools, and that cannot.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
The last, I'll let you close with just one last thing. First of all, how can people learn more about what you're doing?
So
go ahead. Yeah.
These are our little our palm cards, but we are Education Freedom for Oregon, spelled out Education Freedom for Oregon. So you can go to our website .com. You can then. There's a frequently asked question, a whole bunch of stuff. There's the measures there. There's the amendments. There's summaries, and there's also the petition, because we need to have these petitions signed. So on the little drop down that says petitions, people can go and print out the single signer. So if they just want to sign for themselves, they print it out, sign it, mail it back to me. Or they can print out what we call the 10-liner, and they can print those out and then become the circulator and go walk up and down their neighborhood and just get their neighbors or their friends to sign it and mail that back. And there's instructions. It's very simple. They can always email us too.
So if folks are listening and they go to church and they're active and they can print a bunch, and they can so they can do that. They can
they can print them right off the website.
And they can have it circulated in their church or event or whatever, maybe a party at their house. And they can mail it to you, and all the instructions on their website. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yes.
And then if they want to support financially, there's also.
We'd love that. We need the money.
Perfect.
If anybody has they can write a $15 million check. Just mail it on in.
Are you guys looking for volunteers?
Yes, absolutely. We need volunteers to help us collect signatures, to help us in our office. If anybody's really good at Excel, we just have a tremendous amount of tasks to do, because this is just moms and dads and grandparents. That's all we are here. We're working, and so we would love volunteers to help us in myriad. Everybody has a different skill set, so we would love folks to write to us and say, hey, I can help you with this, and I can help you with that. So we love volunteers.
Perfect. I know you have a newsletter as well. So folks can sign up on that and be updated as well, and I know I get mine.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
If you can close with what, I don't think we talked about if you have a family and what motivates you to do this work.
Oh, well, I do have a wonderful husband, 2 kids. They are not going to benefit from this because they're already out of school, but So my motivation is I'm retired, I have a skill set, and I'm doing this for students I don't know, probably will never know, because I think it's important to do it. Oregon needs an improvement to its education system. And I've benefited tremendously from all of my degrees and all of my education. And I just love, I might be kind of a freak, but I love school and I love learning stuff. And I've written books and I've taught classes. And I just think that everybody should have that fire in their belly of loving school. And I'm afraid if there's kids in an environment where they're not happy, they're not going to know the joy that can come from reading and learning. And so I want them all to be able to flow freely to the environment where they can really just think, I love school, I love education, and maybe it's music, and maybe it's woodworking, and maybe it's history, and I don't know what it is, but I love school, and I hope that turns them on too and makes them want to like school.
It's amazing. Awesome. Anything last you want to add to that?
No, this was
well, very exciting.
I learned a lot.
yeah, very exciting. Great program. We'll definitely have you back on to update us on your progress, and we'll talk about how we can maybe you can join some of our drives and things like that. And,
I'd love to
collect some petitions. But basically, yeah. If you guys have any questions, like you said, can you go to repeat your website one more time?
Sure. Education Freedom for Oregon, spelled out. educationfreedomfororegon.com. They can email me at info@educationfreedomfororegon.com.
Perfect. Well, you heard that. I just also want to remind, if you didn't tune in from the beginning, there is a very important survey for individuals who are living here for a very short amount of time, maybe immigrants, refugees from Ukraine, and so on. If you are looking for services, there's actually a survey going around in Clark County. If you are looking to for a specific service, this is a great opportunity to speak up and say what exactly is what you're looking for. And there's also a few other questions that they'll help determine Clark County, if you live in Clark County, Vancouver area, what exactly is needed in this area. So please, if you are a immigrant, if you know maybe some new immigrants, if you are helping an immigrant, make sure you fill out the survey. Make sure you share it with the others, and make sure everybody fills it out and gets the voice out there. Because once the services come out and you're not happy with them, and if you didn't do this, you could have done it, and it could have been beneficial for you. So once again, a reminder to visit our social media and message us. You can always message us on social media, and we will send you that link to the survey. And soon we will have it available on our website as well. And also, you can always just call or text message one of our phone numbers, which is 971-244-2228. And once again, to get that survey, you can always text us 971-244-2228. And like I said, social media is another great place. Thank you for tuning in. You can always find all of our previous programs, all of our future programs on our social media, on our YouTube page, on our website, and we'll be happy to assist you in any way you can. Remember, election is coming up in just a couple of months, May 16th. We'll be happy to help, and we will have resources on our website like always. Thank you for tuning in to Slavic Vote Live. My name is Dimitri. We had Yaroslav with us and Donna as our guest. Thank you very much again.
You bet.
We will see you guys next time. Thank you.
Внимание!
Редакция медиахолдинга Slavic Family не несет ответственность за содержание рекламных сообщений и авторских программ.